Well, we had a really big step forward this week, and that is we finally got ourselves up out of the gravel and we did the last of the foundation footing drains, and that's pretty exciting for us. What we realized is we were putting this together that there's some people who are watching these videos who don't know what a footing drain is. So we thought we'd just take a minute to get you oriented and to see what's going on here. So here's a drawing. This is a concrete wall, as you can imagine here. It probably goes up higher than you see it on this page. And then here's the concrete floor. That's what you see inside when you're walking around in the basement. And right underneath that floor, there's some kind of insulation. It might be a foam insulation in most cases. And then you've got the stone or soil underneath this. In many cases, you'll have a concrete footer that sits underneath this concrete wall. In our case, we have stone under there. If you want to know more about stone and superior walls, you can see one of the other videos we've looked at. And then, of course, outside, then you have the soil that backs up against the wall. This would just be your yard or garden or whatever else is out here. Now, the whole idea of footing drains or drains in general is to move the water away from the house. And what you have to assume is that you're going to have water. You can't pretend that you're not going to have it. So you might as well just manage the water that comes. So what happens in this is you can imagine as groundwater might come up from below, as you see in this illustration. What the footing drains do, that's these two circles. One is the inside footing drain, that's the one that's inside the wall, and then the outside footing drain, that's the one that's outside the wall. What you can imagine then is that these footing drains provide sort of a clear, open way for water to flow, and they flow out through these tubes into other places. And they do this by maintaining a space inside of the subsoil area where water can flow easily, even if it doesn't move easily through the clay soil above or whatever you happen to have. Now, to do this, you use some round PVC pipe in many cases. There's lots of variants here. We used a round PVC pipe that's perforated on the bottom so that as the groundwater comes up from below, can go into those perforated holes and then can move freely in this channel that's been created by the footing drains. Now, one other point, of course, is we're talking about groundwater here. The groundwater can come up. You may live in an area with high groundwater. The other point, of course, is that you can have water that comes down from the sky and it could end up between the soil and the wall, but eventually it ends up down here. This whole management of the water that ends up in here is the topic of another discussion for another day. But you get the idea. Even if the water were to come down and freely flow down the wall into this space, it needs a way out. And that's what the footing drains do. Now, in our particular case, we're using footing drains that are a combination of materials. They have some stone inside of them. They have this kind of technical wrap around them. We call this it's a technical wrap. I forget exactly what you call it. And so we'll have some stone around the tube that gives it a free flow of area. And then this cloth goes around it, and that keeps mud and other stuff from getting into the space that you've designed specifically for the drain. And you can see how that might work here. Many of the videos that others make, they call this a burrito wrap, so that you've got the tube in there with a little bit of stone, and then you've got the cloth around the outside, which keeps the mud out. And maybe that's the tortilla of the burrito. Well, here's the design of the house that we are building, and it has got this kind of funny, kind of a drunken T shape to it, I suppose. There's three kind of main sections: a west section, a center section, and an east section. And if you were to look at this, this whole section that's in white is fully excavated, and these couple areas in gray are not fully excavated. They just go down to a certain area. The garage, for instance, is got some space underneath it. The shop has soil underneath. There's no full basement underneath here. There's going to be an exercise or fitness pool in here. It's not a full size anything. You could think of it as a glorified jacuzzi in a way, where that won't have any basement space underneath. But all the rest of the area here will be excavated to the point where you can actually walk in the basement. Now, in this particular case, in the front here, we've got a front porch. In the back, we have a back patio. That also then is excavated space, and we'll have a wall along here on which a concrete front porch or back patio could rest, and there'll be a walkout on the left side. So the exterior envelope of the house is really this gray line, this black line, which circumscribes the house. Now, there's this blue line that just showed up on the screen here. This is the interior drain tile or interior foundation drain. And its idea is it goes around the inside of that wall and gives you that sort of burrito construction, allows water to flow freely inside of this space. So if you have any groundwater that comes up from below, it's got a place to go inside of the interior footing drain. Of course, it has to get out. And the way that happens is through a sump pump. You probably have one of these in your house if you live in an area like ours. In our case, we're putting in 2 sump pumps. It's really belt and suspenders. You probably only really need one, but we're doing it just in case. In our area, there's a lot of high water. And if one of these were to fail, we'd want the other one to be working. It just gives us a way of making sure that we don't have a problem, even if we have a problem. Now, there's this exterior footing drain. Let's talk about that for a second. And here it's outlined in green. And you can see it pretty much parallels the blue path. In this particular case, it takes a few sort of shortcuts, but you can see it's going around the outside of the excavated portion of the house. And then you can see it's got a sort of a tube going off to the north and a tube going off to the south. So instead of having a footing or having a sump pump, a couple of these, we've set up some tubes that drain out downhill. And hopefully what will happen is the exterior footing drains will just drain to daylight, both at the north side of the house and then at the south side of the house. The house is up on a little bit of a hill in this particular case. So we've got footing drains, we have inside footing drains and outside footing drains. They're both managing water that comes up from the ground and a little bit of water that comes perhaps from the sky. So one of the things to notice here is that in all of these spaces, we have to put these burritos in place. And the burritos, of course, have that cloth and the stone around them and so forth. And so how do you do that? Well, in this particular case, in fact, here you can see a finished footing drain. One of the things you have to do is get this stone over the wall. And here you can see that in the front porch, we have this wall that's set up to eventually hold a concrete pad. We had to figure out how to go down and put that footing drain 10 feet below the top of that wall, and there was no good way to do it. And similarly, inside of the garage and shop area, we had to be able to figure out how to get stone in there, even though the exterior walls there, or the foundation walls, are 10 feet high. And so that's where things got pretty interesting. And here you can see a video of us. This is in the garage space where we had a telehandler that we were using to put up the trusses. And it turned out we could put a pallet with a bunch of 5-gallon buckets on it, and we could fill those up with stone and carry the stone over to where it needed to go. It was one way of getting the stone over the wall into the garage area. But getting into the front porch was harder because, for one thing, you couldn't reach all the way down in there with the telehandler. And actually, the telehandler was a little bit too big. And you can see in this particular case, we were using a couple of buckets on a pallet on the end of a long piece of webbing. We were able to use the telehandler kind of like a crane to drop in a bunch of loads of stone to complete that project. The thing that's exciting for us is that's the last of this digging in the stone we have to do. And now we're on to bigger and better things